Christianity and the Templar Order. Each time it was written down, the true revelation of the divine was falsified, because every testament always represents an interpretation of that not experienced. This is how the world religions originated, with all their different sects, which strictly followed dead words to the letter, and were misled from generation to generation further away from the truth. After Christ's death, his words were wrongly interpreted also, and in parts purposely falsified. During the first century, great disappointment was felt within the first original Christian congregations, when part of the scriptures were falsely interpreted by the secret Hebrew brotherhoods, who stood on the side of the Romans. The Atlantean gospel of the life of the Essenes, Essena, which still includes the teachings of reincarnation, but excludes any interpretation of evil, led through the centuries to the strong division between heaven and hell. Peter, in his last days, recognized what had happened and asked to be hanged by his feet, symbolizing the world's confused situation. Back then, all his followers were only comforted by the knowledge that one day in the future, just before the return, they would be reborn in order to inherit the world.
To summarize what the Bible says about the coming of Jesus Christ, one could go to the words of Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 24. This chapter is often seen as a synopsis, you might say, of the Apocalypse or the writings of the Apostle John. And in this particular chapter, Jesus outlined very clearly how he will come. He will come visibly, personally, as a real person. He will come in the midst of noise, so it'll be an audible event, and a very dramatic, powerful and glorious event. He said he's going to return with all his glory, the glory of his Father, the glory of the holy angels. It will be a dramatic event.
For a long time, Christianity and the secret lodges of the Brotherhood had entered the European royal courts, where various knightly brotherhoods went to look for their roots in the Holy Land. Crusaders from all the European countries started on their journey to the Holy Land. Some of these knights had not been initiated by the Freemason Brotherhood, who had already at the time total control over the Vatican. They were searching for the truth because they disagreed with the activities of the head of the church. Especially during the 11th century, German and Baltic crusaders traveled to Syria, where an old master called the Elder of the Days told them the whole truth about the Atlantean brother war of the priesthood castes. The Babylonian stone plates revealed to them the destruction of the Aramaic Brotherhood by the Hebrew Brotherhoods, and the whole truth about the falsification of the gospel of the Essenes and Christ's message. This led to an immediate split from Christianity, and a new order of Templars was founded. After their return, the Templars used their newfound knowledge of Atlantis and built the Grail castles throughout all European countries. They introduced the money system and enjoyed a high reputation. Later, they were persecuted by the church. The old lodges followed, and the Inquisition began. Some of the knights came to Vienna, Heilig and Kreuz, where they established several monasteries and castles on sacred geomantic energy sites, where they kept part of the knowledge in scriptures. For centuries, part of the Templars' knowledge was hidden in and around Vienna. After the Inquisition, the old brotherhoods again seized power in a new disguise. Part of the Freemasons and of the Illuminati were directly evolved from this Templar Brotherhood. At the turn of the century, there was a monk in Vienna, a member of the Templar Order, who did not quite fit into the picture of the Brotherhood. He left the Brotherhood and the monastery near Vienna, and took the name of Lance von Liebenfels. He later founded the new Templar Order.
Der Lanz von Liebenfels war vorher also Previously, Lanz von Liebenfels had been a spiritual member of the Order of the Holy Cross and had written a work on a knight statue which stands on a monkey. This philosophy of one who stands on a monkey had an extraordinary impact on him, and this was also the core of the ideology.
Hat ihm also einen unerhörten Eindruck gemacht, und das war auch der Kern der Ideologie. Und zwar, meinte, dass dieser Ritter, der oben steht,
He believed that this knight who stands on top is a Templar, and that the Templars, the noble or heroic knights, were supposed to be in opposition to the ordinary humanity, which is represented by the monkey and which has to be crushed. Indeed, there would be a godlike human race and an animal human race. One should say in opposition to the animal human race.
Lanz von Liebenfels mingled his Templar knowledge with the Bhagavad Gita translations, which describe the battle of the gods of Atlantis. Later, he taught specifically that the Aryan race of the Brotherhood was the god human beings, and that the Chandalan were the godless beings. They were involved in endless battles, as mentioned in the Indian mysticism. His worldview was that the Hebrew Brotherhood was the direct descendant of the godless, which suppressed the world of the Aryan gods during the Dark Age. Another interpretation was that the Nordic and Germanic people were the only descendants of the Atlantean Aryan gods, and that their origin could only be identified by their blonde hair and blue eyes.
Ja, also Lanz von Liebenfels war ja dieser grundlegenden Überzeugung, dass also die Weltgeschichte bewegt wird.
Lanz von Liebenfels was fundamentally convinced that world history arose from the battle between the races, between the noble, heroic and godlike human beings and the animal beings, and in between there were even some combination of both. Thus, through a cleansing process and through the slavery and oppression of the so-called lower human beings, a godly era would appear, if the race conflict was to be won, in Lanz's view.
Indeed, this is the root of racism. Since the time of Atlantis and its sinking, two castes of priests fought against each other, the Shambhala and Agartha, constantly changing into new shapes and new cultures. The earth and its eras may only be a mirror of this spiritual argument. In Austria, the old Austrian Templar monasteries are situated all along the river Danube. One of them stands in Branau, the birthplace of Adolf Hitler. We can only guess as to whether Adolf Hitler in his youth met Lanz von Liebenfels already at the Branau monastery, or whether he met him later during his years of study in Vienna. We can be sure that Lanz von Liebenfels initiated Hitler into the old Templar knowledge, the brother war of Atlantis, and into the falsification of Christ's message, the persecution of the Aramaic Brotherhood by the Hebrew Brotherhood, and all these secrets of the past. There is an indication that the first contact happened in the Branau monastery, where there is a copy of the Roman lance of the legionnaire Longistas, which Hitler searched for even more fervently than for the Ark of the Covenant. The lance of Longistus was supposed to hold magical powers, as it had been thrust into Christ's heart. The secret Atlantean teaching tells us that when the extraterrestrial gods fell in love with the still reincarnating human animal women, there was a war between the gods. The dissidents, the fallen angels, were banished to become humans. The last remains of the fallen gods from Atlantis were the kings of the Indo-Aryan castes and priesthoods. These Aryan priesthoods were dispersed by the incoming black races of the subcontinents, and the era of the gods came to an end. For thousands of years, the